What is up, my ducks and tricks? Welcome to the Crowder Lake. Today I'll be reading Jailed by ElliottGreen333 on Wattpad. Chapter 17. Virgil's heart shattered in his chest. He didn't know. He had no way of knowing. Damien was crazy, but he never thought he killed anyone. Although, by the sound of it, Damien didn't stick around to see if he actually did kill someone. Logan, I'm so sorry. Virgil choked out. Logan wiped his damp eyes and looked around to Virgil, who was lying in his lap. Ever since then, I worked harder than I ever had before. I stopped at nothing to find Damien and make him pay for that day. Obviously. Logan paused, squeezing Virgil's hand into a tighter embrace. Obviously, I never got to do that. Logan let out a heavy sigh. Patton stood in the hallway, staring at the two lying on the stiff couch. His eyes were filled with tears. The rag he was holding up slipped from his grip. So, that's what happened, Patton said aloud. Logan jumped in his seat and the sound of Patton's voice. Logan read his brother's face before shooting up off the couch and approaching him. Virgil watched quietly and confused. Patton, please. You have to understand now as to why I didn't tell you. No, Logan, I understand. You told me. I don't understand. You told me that Mom and Dad passed away peacefully when I was 5. When I woke up from a coma, they weren't there. And you told me they died peacefully? Logan, how could you lie to me like that? Patton, you were only 10. You didn't remember the accident even happened. I was worried that type of information would figuratively tear you apart. Do you think I am? Patton mumbled loud enough for everyone to hear and understand. Logan's eyes widened. Patton, that's not the point. So you couldn't tell me now that we're young adults? You just went through a rough breakup. I didn't want to add more onto your plate. So overworking yourself night after night about Damien's case is okay then. You know, when you mentioned to Emil that you were still caught up on Mom and Dad, I thought you were so upset that they died. That you couldn't be there to try to save them. Not that Damien killed them. Patton retaliated. Patton, please, if you just let me explain. I've heard enough. Patton cut him off. With that, he pushed past Logan and stormed off the door. Patton wrapped his fingers around the doorknob and stopped. I hope you get better, Logan. He then walked out, shutting the door behind him. Logan faltered in the hallway. His body was frozen, his tongue was speechless. Virgil stood up, moving towards Logan slowly. Virgil grabbed Logan's hand in his own, moving both of their hands close to his chest. Logan, please, talk to me. Virgil begged. I didn't want him to leave with his parents. Death all his life like me. Logan stuttered. Virgil nodded, meeting Logan's eyes. I get it. It scared you. You didn't want Patton to feel the pain you did. But you have to realize that you can't keep carrying Damon's case on your shoulders anymore. Virgil told him in a calming manner. Logan nodded, his eyes filled with tears. Virgil pondered to himself for a second. His face lit up after a couple seconds. Come on, Virgil said, pulling on Logan's arms. Where are we going? Logan said, snapping out of his trance. Virgil smiled, inching closer and closer to the door. I know what will make you feel better. Virgil said as they came to the door, opening the door to let in a cold breeze, filled both of the boys' bodies with chills. The moon was set in the sky and stars were twinkling. Virgil smiled to himself. Perfect. Virgil dragged Logan down the stairs and past him up the apartment buildings. Virgil, I'm confused. Where are we going? Logan questioned. It's an old apartment complex. It has to have it. Virgil stopped himself as they rounded the corner and seen a gated apartment pool. Logan's brows raised. The pool? Yeah, come on. Virgil tugged him at once. They went to the gate, which Virgil unlatched and opened with ease. Once inside, the emo body led to the detective to the deep end of the pool. Virgil kicked his worn Converse to the side and stuck his feet in the heated pool. Logan took a suggestive step back out of pure confusion. Logan looked up in confusion, simply patting the ground next to him. Logan looked over at Virgil's Converse on the ground. He looked down at the Polish dress shoes, and then over at Virgil, who was staring into the pool's calming waves made by kicking his feet. Logan's expression shifted into a smile as he kicked his shoes next to Virgil's and took a seat next to him. He dipped his foot into the water, feeling its warmth. He put both feet in. Virgil leaned in on Logan's shoulder, the lights under the water of the pool illuminating the world around them. This is very nice, Virgil. I really needed this. Logan admitted. Virgil hummed in agreement. You said you felt more like you have in a long time back there. I figured this might have been what you meant. True, I was a lot calmer before the accident. I wouldn't say the drugs Remy injected me with made me feel like that again, but I did feel like I wasn't watching my life get thrown away by a dead guy anymore. Virgil chuckled at that. Logan blushed, and a little laugh escaping the emo's lips, making his heart bounce. Logan pushed concrete around the pool, propelling himself into the deep end. He made a small splash, making Virgil's arms fly up to avoid the water. Logan laughed as the water began soaking into his clothes. He approached Virgil slowly, sticking his arm out for him to join the detective. I don't really know how to swim, Virgil admitted, flustered. I'll hold you the entire time, Logan said in a breath. Virgil's face heated as he grabbed Logan's hand. Logan pulled him in, a splash following him. Logan wrapped his arm around Virgil's waist, and the other on his shoulder. Virgil's hands came together and hung around Logan's back. The stars danced and the two gazed into each other's eyes in the weighted water. Logan lowered his stance, bringing them both under the water. Virgil looked panicked and his cheeks puffed, holding in oxygen. Logan smiled in the water. Logan's calmness brought Virgil back down to earth. He smiled too. Logan pulled Virgil closer to his face. The moment seemed to last forever, but it ended in their lips meeting as they came up for air, not releasing the kiss. Chapter 18. Penn lightly shut his brother's apartment door, hoping down the stairs quickly before anyone could follow him. Penn's mind was swimming. How could Logan lie to him for so long? How did Penn not know about what really happened to his parents? Did the rest of his family know about this lie? Penn's vision grew blurrier and blurrier, heavy tears leaking through. Penn walked past the parking lot, instead of walking out towards the main street. Since Remy had his car, Patton had to walk home. Before, Thomas gave him a ride to Logan's, but Patton doubted his boss was still awake at this time of night. Patton checked his watch. 9:22 p.m. Yeah, the boss was definitely at home with his family by now. Patton didn't want to disrupt that. The more the freckle man walked, the lower the temperature dropped. He began to shiver, snuggling into his jacket. Patton walked began to slow as his frozen feet in his shoes. When he turned the corner, an illuminated bus stop caught his attention. His pace grew towards it. Every step seemed like a great accomplishment to him. Patton sat down on the hard metal seat, his body racked with shivers. His teeth chattered in his skull. Tears fell down Patton's face. At a quicker rate now, his thoughts becoming vulgar. How did he not know that Damien killed his parents? Why else would Logan care so much about Damien, especially after death? The poor boy was now silently sobbing, his knees pulled up to his chest. Patton felt so lost. The world was ripping apart at its seams. Everything was falling apart. A voice called out. Patton lifted his head and looked onto the streets. In front of him was a bright red Mustang with the jet black tires. More importantly, was the man inside the car. Officer Royal? Patton questioned, squinting his eyes and adjusting to the glasses. The man in the car nodded and motioned for him to come closer. Patton's face heated up. The warmth felt good on his cold bones. The freckle-faced boy walked closer to the car. Please, come inside, he insisted. Patton opened the door and got inside. The heater was kicked on full blast. Patton's shivering blue hands flew closer to the vents, blowing the air. God, how long have you been out there? The officer questioned. Patton tracked the car's clock. About 15 minutes, officer, Patton responded. Roman rolled his eyes and smiled. Please, Patton, call me Roman. No need to be professional outside of work. Roman grinned. Patton chuckled at his joke. What were you doing out here anyway? Me and Logan got into a fight, Patton answered, feeling tears come back to him. He took his sleeve of his jacket and wiped them away. Do you want me to give you a drive home? Roman asked. Patton nodded, not wanting Roman to let go of him, but he had to in order to drive. The two separated while Patton gave him directions to his apartment. The two chatted the whole drive, Roman making Patton laugh while Patton told Roman what it was like working as a receptionist at the station. They pulled into Patton's apartment sooner than they could both would have liked. They were enjoying their night. Roman parked the car, not removing the key. Roman? Patton spoke meekly. Yes, Patton? Roman. Without another word, Patton leaned over, gave Roman a peck on the cheek. Both of their faces began to glow red. Roman's eyes were like saucers, but Patton's just chuckled. Thank you for tonight. I really needed it, Patton said. Roman blinked a few times, but then he turned to face Patton. Yeah, sure, any time, darling, Roman smirked. Patton's blush deepened. He fidgeted with the zipper on his coat, the heater in the car feeling good on his chilled bones. Do you mind if I ask, what was the fight about? Roman questioned. Patton shook his head and leaned back into the stiff leather seat of Roman's car. Well, when I was about 10, our family got into a car accident, and I slipped into a coma. When I woke up, I didn't remember that accident at all. Logan told me that and I had some kind of reaction to something. When I asked where my parents were, he told me that our parents died when I was 5. I believed him. I had to. I didn't remember it. Anyway, I just learned the truth because Logan told the story without knowing I was listening. He said that he was trying to protect me, but why couldn't he tell me now? Patton finished, letting a sob escape him. Roman wrapped his arm around Patton, pulling him closer. Patton's crying ceased as he looked over to Roman. A romantic smirk spread across his lips. Patton blushed, not wanting to fight the affection. Well, how do you feel now? Roman asked. Patton shrugged. I guess I feel lied to. Like everyone was in on a joke but me, and I wasn't in on the joke because the joke was on me. That makes sense. Roman agreed. The two sat in silence for a while. Do you feel like you would have been hurt as a child? I mean, I guess. I was pretty innocent when I was a kid. Patton shrugged. Then do you think Logan did a pretty good thing trying to protect you? Roman said back to him. Patton's eyes sparkled. You're right, Patton whispered as he turned to face Roman. You're right. Logan only wanted the best for me, and now I've pushed him away. Patton took the corner of his sleeve and dabbed away some coming tears. Hey, you didn't do anything wrong, Roman cooed. You were hurt. You confronted your brother, and now you see why he did it. Nothing wrong with that. Patton sighed in agreement. Roman's hand traveled down Patton's, grabbing it and giving him a reassuring squeeze. Don't be down on yourself, okay? Roman asked the boy in front of him. Patton nodded with a small smile. Patton grabbed the handle and pushed the door open. He walked around the car and headed towards his apartment door. Roman watched him, about to go inside. Something inside Roman never wanted the night to end. Everything about tonight was perfect. Wait! Patton turned around, seeing Roman standing outside the car door, on one leg still in the car. Can I see you again outside of work sometime? Patton's smile grew, ear to ear. He walked back over to Roman's car, pulling his phone out of his pocket. I can give you my number, and I'm available for coffee next week, Patton said shyly. Roman smiled, inputting his number into Patton's phone. Chapter 19. Logan carried a soaking wet Virgil up the stairs to his apartment. Virgil insisted that he could walk, but Logan assured him it was no trouble. The detective was simply beaming with happiness. Virgil had been right. A little swim was exactly what Logan had needed. Logan set Virgil down on one side of the apartment. Both of their clothes were still soaked and dripping. The wet material stuck to their skin, but neither of them seemed to mind. Why don't you go get it in the shower, and I'll dry these clothes, Logan suggested. Virgil nodded and led the way to the bathroom. Virgil shut the door and undressed. He cracked open the door just enough to give Logan his clothes. Logan then put the clothes in a laundry hamper and then went to his room to change. Logan put on an old science camp t-shirt that still fit him from high school and some sweatpants. His wet clothes joined Virgil's in the hamper. He then walked down to the hall to Logan's office, which had a washer and dryer in it. Logan stuck their clothes in the dryer and set the cycle. He then heard a quick stepping of feet, followed by the door shutting. Logan smiled, presuming that Virgil had finished his shower. Logan walked back out of the hallway and entered into his small room. His bed was unmade, and there were notes and papers all over his nightstands. While it seemed like a mess to Logan, it was just organized chaos. Virgil walked up behind him in his sweatpants from the night before and no shirt. Logan didn't notice how skinny Virgil was, not to mention pale. His chest was also riddled with scars and halfway healed cuts. Do you have an extra blanket I could use? It was kind of cold last night, Virgil asked. A smile appeared on Logan's face as he put his hands into his sweatpants pockets. Would you like to sleep with me tonight? Logan questioned. Virgil's face brightened with a red hue. Logan smiled, taking it as a yes. He motioned for Virgil to enter the room. As Logan got into bed, Virgil followed, crawling next to him. Virgil snuggled into Logan's chest while Logan put an arm around him. He began mindlessly tracing circles on Virgil's chest. The ammo hummed in comfort. I enjoyed tonight, Logan finally said. You were right. Relaxing was something I really needed to do. Yeah, you seemed really tense to me when we first met, Virgil admitted. Funny, that's what a lot of people used to say when they first met me. Logan giggled. Virgil smiled loosely. Maybe that's why the people down at the station were so afraid of me. Yeah, 'cause you work your ass off daily. Sounds about right. Virgil chuckled to himself. Logan let out a small smile. He kissed the top of Virgil's forehead, who hummed in enjoyment. I really, really like you, Virgil. Do you know that? Logan asked him. Yes, Virgil sighed. His eyes started to flutter close, and his breathing deepened. Logan reached out in the nightstand and grabbed a book. He started to flip through the pages as Virgil fell deeper into sleep. Logan wasn't really tired. In fact, he felt wide awake. Logan continued to read half of the hour before his hand resting on Virgil's began to fall and rise at a faster rate. Logan stopped and looked over at Virgil, his chest moving up and down faster than normal. Virgil's hands were shaking and his head was shifting around uncomfortably. Virgil, wake up! Logan pleaded, shaking her shoulder. Logan let out a small scream that made Logan jump in the bed. This was bad. Logan shook his shoulder more aggressively. Virgil, wake up! Please, it's only a nightmare! Logan told him. Virgil's eyes suddenly shot open, and his body jerked upward. His breathing was erratic, and tears streamed down his face. He sat upright with his mouth hung open for a second. His eyes were floating across the room, trying to get a sense of where he was. Virgil? Logan finally questioned. Nemo quickly turned to face Logan. His panicked expression turned fearful as a sob let out from his body and collapsed into Logan, wrapping his arms around him and crying. Logan's heart ached for the boy. He stroked his hair calmly, giving me words of encouragement every now and then. Virgil finally gathered the strength to look up to Logan, who had a patient smile across his face. You feeling better? Virgil nodded and swallowed the dread in his throat. Do you want to talk about it? Logan asked. It wasn't anything that bad, just a recurring dream from the day Damien kidnapped me. Virgil explained. Logan nodded with understanding eyes. Virgil shifted his body to back where he was before. The silence between them grew before Virgil took in a long sigh. I was walking to college from my home. I had my major papers in my hand, and for once in my life, I felt good about myself. When I rounded the corner, I noticed someone started to follow me. I started to walk faster. Eventually, he caught up to me and pinned me to the wall. He cut my throat and began to beat me. I ended up losing consciousness, which is when he grabbed me, and the rest was history. Virgil recited. Logan nodded and sighed. I am sorry that happened to you, Virgil. No one should ever go through something like this. Logan told him, holding him closer. Virgil's eyes were trying to close again, but Virgil was refusing. Logan could tell Virgil was tried, but did not want to go back to sleep. I'm gonna take a walk. Clear my head, you know? Virgil told him. Do you want me to go with you? Logan asked him. No, I'll be okay, Virgil said calmly. Logan nodded and let go of him. Virgil stumbled up, shivering in his skin, made contact with the cold air. Your jacket is still in the dryer. Take that before you go. Virgil nodded sleepily and walked lazily down the hall. Logan watched him, sad to see him leave. He knew it was for the best. He heard the front door shut and the apartment walls shake as he stomped down the stairs. Logan sighed and settled into his bed. It was growing colder. Logan already missed him. Chapter 20. Logan awoke the next morning, turning over, only to the blaring sun screaming at him through his closed eyes. He shielded his eyes, opening up them a little amount. Logan's head was spinning slightly, full of dreams that he couldn't recall clearly in his head anymore. The detective removed the covers from his body, swinging his feet over the bed. He rubbed his face with his hands, getting the sleep out of his system. Logan looked behind him, seeing the covers lay over oddly. His eyes widened as he kind of laughed at himself. I'm sorry, Virgil. I'm not used to having someone else in my bed. Logan apologized. He looked over the covers, back only to see Virgil wasn't in the other side of his bed. Logan's heartbeat quickened. Most possibilities ran through his head. Where had Virgil gone? He went for a walk, but he didn't come back. Then the smell of coffee ran through Logan's nose. Another idea came to mind. Perhaps Virgil was already awake. Logan nodded to himself, wanting to convince himself that Virgil was already awake. He stood up and brushed his hair back, grabbing his glasses and putting them on. He then changed into some worn jeans and a black polo and put on a jacket from his old college. He then put on some dark blue sneakers and rushed down the hallway. Hey, Virgil, you got up early, Logan called out. He got no answer. Logan was starting to get even more nervous. He traced his steps back to the guest bedroom. No Virgil. He checked the bathroom. No Virgil. The balcony. No Virgil. Virgil? Logan cried out once more. Still nothing. Logan stretched out his collar of his shirt. His breath was running short with nerves. He then quickly rushed out of his apartment, his feet pounding down the stairs. His steps go fast, rounding the corner in the pool to see only some small children splashing around. He was now panting. This wasn't good. Where the hell's Virgil? Logan looked around for anything he could find that might lead him to Virgil's direction. His eyes pinpointed at an old security camera. The young man smirked, moving towards it. He reached up, standing on the tip of his toes to grab the memory card. The children in the pool stared to him weirdly, but Logan paid no mind. He grabbed the card and inspected it. If he was correct, it should fit into his computer. He raced back to his apartment, pushing the door open and hearing it slam in his wake. He rushed into his office, waking up his computer. His foot was restlessly tapping on the ground, his fingers fidgeting with the card in hand. He lit up with life. He put the little card into his hand drive. The documents filled up, popped up, video file after video file in the card's memory. He clicked on it and started to view the footage. Based on the footage, the card hadn't been checked since the apartment complex was built. Logan was assuming people he knew moved out months ago. He sped through the footage, watching the people leave and enter the pool and surrounding apartments. Logan stopped it when he saw himself and Virgil sitting at the pool. Logan jumped into the pool, causing Virgil to throw his arms up in defense. Logan's eyes teared a bit. He was really in love with Virgil. Now he was gone with no way of contacting him. Logan was practically shaking with worry. Logan surpassed some of the footage until he saw Virgil walking along the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, kicking rocks. The air from his breath could be seen from the cameras. Virgil walked off the cameras for a second, but backed up only 5 other people who were also in frame. Virgil put his hands up in defense. The one guy across from him was talking. The man had a handlebar mustache, a black denim jacket, and a green shirt with a black cracked-down crown on it. The man had a crazed look in his eye and a smile that would kill. After a couple of minutes, the man pointed at Virgil. The 4 other guys behind the mustached man ran past him, grabbing Virgil. Virgil struggled and tried to fight against them. The other men were not budging. The crazed man lifted Virgil's chin, getting a good look at him. Logan clutched his hand into a fist at the sight. The man then slapped Virgil around, walking back towards the street. The man holding Virgil followed, taking Virgil with them. He continued to fight, but he was making no difference. After that, the footage cut to the next day. Logan stood up suddenly from his computer. He raced out of the office, grabbing his car keys as he zoomed out of the apartment like lightning. He locked his door and traveled down the stairs. Logan reached his weathering car that sat inside of it, starting it, and pulled out of his spot. Like a member of NASCAR, he drove out of the parking lot and raced to the police station. The drive at the station wasn't very far from his apartment normally, but Logan could have got there quicker than he normally would. He parked his car and ejected the keys. He rounded to the building, entering through the back door. He ignored the coffee pot, which was usually for him, but Virgil was way more important than a cup of coffee. As soon as he walked out of the room into the main entrance, Patton saw Logan hastily walking towards the stairs. Patton beamed to his brother, who was too laser-focused to notice. The freckled boy stood up from his distance and skipped over to his brother. "Logan, I haven't seen you for a while. I have to tell you, Roman and I started seeing each other. He talked to me about our fight, and you're right. You were only trying to protect me, and I should have seen that sooner. I'm really sorry, though. Also, I don't know if you saw, but they cut Remy. Apparently he went and broke into a car after drugging you." Patton paused for a minute, seeing that Logan was fully paying attention. "Say, where's Virgil?" Logan stopped. He bit his lip, trying to hold back tears. "Lo?" Patton questioned after a moment of too long silence. "Virgil was kidnapped," Logan simply stated. A shocked gasp was heard from Patton as he covered his mouth. "Remy?" Logan questioned. His brother nodded quickly. "Tell Roman I want Remy in the questioning room. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And give me every file from anyone remotely associated with Damien Lyle." "But Logan, that's a lot of file to go through. Do you want me to sort them through a little bit?" Patton asked. Logan just sighed and shook his head. "I want every fucking file, Patton," Logan said calmly. Patton just nodded and returned to his desk. Logan trotted up the stairs and went into his office. He sat down in his chair and rolled himself closer to the desk. He put his hands in his hair. Today would be a long day. Chapter 21. He stared blankly at his computer, too deep in thought to look through the files or focus on anything else. The man that took Virgil was the only thing swimming through his mind. His computer monitor drifted to sleep. Logan fell back in his chair, rubbed his forehead. Despite being a detective, he was more focused than he had ever been in years. That man knew Virgil, but how? Who was he? Where was Virgil now? "Logan?" Snapping up, Roman stood in the doorway, with a tentative look covering his face. It just occurred to Roman that he caught Logan crying. He wiped his face in his hands, tried to get rid of any evidence of the liquid feelings. "Remy's in the questioning room, just like you asked." "Thank you, Roman," Logan said. He pushed himself out of his chair and followed Roman down the stairs. The anger in Logan's chest was bubbling, but he had to push it away. No matter how long he would like to, he couldn't be physical with any of the prisoners. Patton said, "You helped him with our fight last night?" Logan questioned, glancing Roman. "Yeah, he was hurt, but if you ask me, you did the right thing," Roman informed him. Logan nodded as they continued down the corridor to Remy's questioning room. "Do you know who Remy is?" Logan asked the officer, who simply shook his head. "This is Patton's ex." "The abusive one?" Logan nodded in his head in shame. Roman let out a long, low growl. "Do your worst," Roman instructed. Logan nodded and entered the room. Remy's hands were cuffed behind him, his arms around the chair he was sitting in. His usual leather jacket was replaced with a classic orange jumpsuit. His sunglasses were also missing, showing a scar that crossed over his right eye. "So, we met again, eh?" Roman smiled upon seeing the detective. Logan narrowed his eyes, approaching the table and open chair. "Dude, you won't believe it. After, we drugged you, there was this absolute gorgeous car parked at a meter. Me and my boys had to have it, so a little bit of hot water wiring later, and we're purring like a kitten. Turns out that's totally legal. My boys ran away, but I got caught. Can you believe it?" Logan removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. After putting them back on, his headache started to form. How did Patton ever date him for 6 months? "Remy, frankly, I don't care." "I didn't think you would. Hey, where's your little sidekick? Abandoned you?" Remy said, raising his eyebrows. Logan banged his fist on the table surprisingly, making Remy jump. "He was taken, and now you know who took him," Logan exclaimed. Remy snickered to himself, leaning forward a little. "You think I'm gonna help you? I have a better chance at hooking up with your brother again than me telling you anything." Remy laughed. "I highly doubt that," Logan muttered under his breath. Logan stood up and started to circle around the room. Remy shot him a confused look, his leg bouncing anxiously. "Tell me, Remy Sandman, why didn't they catch Damien Lyle after he hit my family's car 15 years ago?" Arthur dropped from the other room, where he was watching behind a one-way mirror. Remy's face paled, although he tried to cover it up with an annoyed gaze. "I don't know what you're babbling about, nerd," Remy spat. Logan hummed in amusement. "I think you do, Remy. Even though you were 18 at the time of the incident, your file clearly states that you worked for Mr. Lyle around that time, did you not?" Remy started to fidget. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you were the driver of the big truck that day," Logan concluded. Remy opened his mouth to fight back, but he closed it, only tiny squeaks and sounds that came out as he searched for his words. Either you could admit to it now, or you could talk. And I'll look past it. Really? Remy questioned. Logan nodded and returned to his seat across the room. You can't be serious. Oh, I am. Unless you wanted to test that theory, I'd start talking, Logan said, putting his hands together. Nervous sweat came from Remy's forehead's glow. Logan smirked to himself. He was winning. The only one I could think of that would actually want Virgil Black is Remus Gray. He was Damien's everything, even when I worked for him. They got together shortly after I left. And if all think Virgil killed Damien, Remus would want his head, Remy explained. You know where his base is? Logan asked. Remy rolled his eyes, wanting the questioning to be over with. By the college, on the back roads. That's all I could tell you, or they'll have my head too, Remy huffed. Logan bowed his head and stood up. He exited the room and proceeded back towards the office. Roman left the room, where they were watching from, catching up to Logan. I didn't know you were that good. I was even nervous. Roman giggled. You said to do my worst, so I did. Logan sighed. The two entered the main lobby and approached Patton's desk. The freckled boy looked up at them. He blushed as Roman took his hand and gave it a kiss. He then looked over to his brother. How did the questionings go? I need a certain Remus Gray's file, Logan said. Patton nodded and rolled his chair over to a filing cabinet. Once the file was found, he handed it to Logan, who took it gratefully. Logan opened it and looked inside. Name, Remus I. Gray. Date of birth, 6/25/1989. Hair color, brown. Gray streak, dyed. Eye color, dark green. Logan nodded. This is it. Awesome, and he told us the location of their base, Logan excitedly exclaimed. Right, we need to get over there quickly. He's already been there for over 12 hours. His PTSD must be through the roof. We've got to get there fast, Logan said. Roman nodded, and the two walked towards the building's exit. Call me when he's safe. I'll send more units your way, Patton called out to us when we left. They rounded the building to all the police cars that lined the station. Roman led Logan to his. When they got inside, Roman ignited the engine and turned on the lights and sirens. After that, they merged into traffic with ease and headed towards the college. Logan's mind was racing. All he hoped was for Virgil's safety. 22. Virgil fought against the four men holding him. They led him back to a van, Remus opening the door for them as he threw the fragile boy into an open cage in the back. Before Virgil could fight back, Remus locked the cage, shooting his new prisoner with a smart smile. Get comfortable, Remus giggled as he slammed the door to the van shut. Virgil brought his knees close to his chest and backed into a corner of a small cage. It was dark. Virgil couldn't see anything. It wouldn't matter. His vision would be too flooded with tears anyway. He bounced his head on his knees, wanting to hide from everything. As the car recklessly drove, Virgil's breathing started to grow uneven, his hands beginning to shake. This wasn't happening. He just fell asleep in Logan's bed. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Over a speed bump without slowing down, Virgil's body jumped upward, hitting the top of his head against the cage. His head started spinning, and he felt like throwing up. His head unconsciously lowered, and his eyes fluttered closed. Virgil began to stir. His bones were aching, and his head was pounding. The ringing in his ears was fading out. He raised his head and opened his eyes. He could feel his hands rubbing against the rope, and his body sitting in an uncomfortable metal chair. His legs were also being held down with a rope. He tied against the chair's legs. A gag was tightly strapped around his mouth, rendering him incapable of making any noise. Virgil could see very little. He was in some type of warehouse. The only light coming through was natural light, based on the amount of light in the sun must have been rising. The young boy's head whipped around when he began to hear footsteps approaching him. His pupils shrunk. Remus marched over to him, a knife in hand and a twisted grin attached to his head. Awake, I see, Remus hummed. Virgil narrowed his eyes. He couldn't let Remus see the fear in Virgil was truly feeling. A long time since I've seen your pretty little face, Virgil, Remus chuckled, grabbing Virgil's chin and a better look at him. Virgil jerked his head to the side, making Remus let go. Still a disobedient little brat. No need to worry. All bad habits will be corrected in time. Remus laughed. The boy's breathing started to grow rapid. Beads of sweat ran down his forehead. You know, everybody here hates you. They truly believe you killed my Damien. However, between you and me, that's not the truth. Is it? Remus questioned, his face getting closer to Virgil's. Virgil tried to calm himself down, doing a breathing exercise he learned from his counselor when he was younger. He was actually feeling calmer, but Remus slapped his cheek hard, leaving a hard, red handprint and a sting on Virgil's cheek. Listen to me, freak! Remus shouted. You're never getting out of here. Try to calm down all you want. This is a living nightmare, and you're never waking up. Virgil nodded his head, sinking to his chair. Remus smiled. Good boy, he muttered, ruffling Virgil's hair. Theo shivered under the crazed man's touch. Remus fiddled with his knife in his hand, his eyes focused heavily on it before his eyes flashed to the prisoner's neck. A grin appeared on his face. He brought the knife to Virgil's neck, ragged liquid starting to run down into Virgil's shirt. Listen carefully to me, pet, Virgil spat, shuddering as more blood fell from his neck. You'll do everything I tell you, and I might let you live. Do you understand me? Virgil nodded, tears pouring down his face. Good boy, the crazed man whispering into Virgil's ear. Chills ran down Virgil's spine. Remus went behind Virgil to the ropes holding him. He cut arm ropes and his leg ropes. As soon as he did that, Virgil bolted up from the chair and ran towards the door closest to him. He hoped it was an exit, but he'd take what he could. He tried to push the gag off his mouth as he ran, but it was too tight. He ran to the door, rattling the doorknob. It was locked. He banged on the door, banging like anyone would listen, and opened the door. Remus was right behind him. He kicked the back of Virgil's leg, making him sink to the floor. He then proceeded to beat Virgil, making sure his face wasn't shy bruises or fresh cuts and oozing blood. When he was finished, Virgil's breathing was shallow, his eyes half open. Remus breathed heavily. First rule, pet. Don't try to run away, or I'll do much worse to you. Got it? Virgil nodded. Good. Now stay awake and follow me. You've got to get into something more appropriate. Virgil shuddered at the words, but stood up and followed Remus. He was led to a bedroom. It was small, but a big bed and a dresser sat inside of it. The door shut and Remus shoved Virgil against the door. Remus smashed his lips against Virgil's. The boy couldn't push him away. He was too weak and tired after the beating. Remus lowered back into Virgil's neck, licking and biting, creating many small hickeys all over his pale neck. Virgil's legs gave out while Remus holding him from falling so he could keep biting his neck. Remus finally let go, the emo falling to the ground. Remus towered above him, giving him a kick at his side. Get up, Remus demanded. Virgil got up, his bones yelling at him with pain. Remus smirked, walking over to the dresser. He opened it up and looked at Virgil. Take your clothes off, pet, Remus demanded. Virgil didn't give much of a choice. He removed his jacket, revealing his bare chest. He then took off his sweatpants. Thankfully, he wore underwear underneath them. Remus looked over at him, not approving. That was two. Virgil swallowed his pride and kicked off his underwear. Remus smirked, a small laugh escaping him. Remus tried to cover himself with his hands. He was far from uncomfortable. Remus turned back around and threw some clothes to Virgil. He barely caught them in his hands. He then looked up. Remus had moved closer, the crazed man pinning Virgil's shoulders against the wall, moving his hand down to Virgil's crotch. The emo shrugged, crying softly. Put on those clothes and be on my bed in 10 minutes, Remus whispered to Virgil. He laughed as he let go of Virgil and walked out of the room. Virgil looked down at his clothes in his hands. It was a black miniskirt with a flat black bra. He cried into the clothes. He wished this was all over, but something told him that this was only the beginning. Chapter 23. Roman pulled up to the area Remy described. Logan inspected the area. The college was in a section and college students riddled the sidewalks. The area seemed normal. No out of the ordinary buildings or sketchy people walking around. It was normal. Logan didn't like it. The two exited the cop car and snooped around. Roman kept his hand on his gun, not removing the gun just yet. The surrounded trees, blue and ominous, went towards the two. Roman shivered at it, but Logan stood his ground. It's like a goose chase, Roman declared, scratching the back of his head. How do we know Remy wasn't lying to us, or that Remus and his little army didn't switch bases? No, it has to be here. Virgil said he originally got kidnapped walking to college, Logan said, pointing to the college campus in front of them. Damien wouldn't have wanted to drag him super far unless his base was nearby. Roman nodded in agreement. The two became silent, simply looking over at the college campus, while shuffling through their thoughts. You know, when I attended college, there is one place that I think of would make a great base, Roman blurted. Logan jerked his head to the side, telling Roman to take lead. He did, guiding the detective down the street and through the old campus. Logan's mind flooded with memories. The giant library where Logan would stay from opening till closing during most of his free days. The big classroom buildings that Logan learned everything he knows. He remembered the campus like it was the back of his hand. But there was hardly any time to reminisce, as Logan was having a hard time keeping up with Roman. After their voyage, the two stopped in the journey. The building in front of them was far from the main college. No one else was around. It would be a perfect spot if you wanted to be unnoticed. Logan glanced up at the building in front of them, his heart dropping slightly. The nurses' pavilion? Logan asked. More specifically, the surgeon's area. It's been abandoned for a long time. Lots of rumors went around that they never removed the surgical tools from inside of it. Roman finished, biting his lip. He risked a chance at Logan. His face read heartbreak. Just the idea of what they could be doing to Virgil with the sharp surgery equipment. We gotta get in there, Logan mumbled. He took a step towards the door, but was stopped by Roman pulling him back. Take a step back, Calculator Watch. This is Remus, one of Damien Lai's hideouts. We can't just walk in unnoticed. You're right. We need back entrance of some sort. Logan agreed. The two walked around the sides of the old landmark. Logan was beginning to lose hope. Every window was either boarded or locked. They reached the very back of the building. There was an old door barely hanging by the hinges. The officer looked to the detective. He nodded in approval. Logan walked up to the door, using his shoulder, and ran to the door, which fell and collapsed instantly. Logan followed Roman inside. The officer drew his gun, pointing it out in front of him. Logan pulled his phone out of his pocket, turning the flashlight on. They could see why most of the windows were boarded up now. Glass riddled the floor, along with the red stains on the concrete floor. Logan shuddered. He had never seen this place, even while he was a student. There was no point for him to come over to the side of campus. Roman pushed Logan's back to the wall as the two men wandered to the room in front of them. They couldn't understand what they were saying, but they were laughing. Once it was clear, Logan followed Roman and proceeded. He led Logan ahead. They quietly followed the goons, staying a healthy distance away from them, not wanting to be noticed. Roman kept a lookout behind them while Logan made sure the two goons didn't turn around to see them. The tension was high. This had to be the place. Virgil had to be here. If he wasn't, Logan wouldn't know what to do next. The men Logan and Roman were following stopped. The two took cover behind some crates in the room. They stood in front of the door that required a keycard. Once one of them pulled it out of his pocket and went in the scanner. Before Logan could process, Roman stood up from his crate. The officer then shoved the goon without the keycard's head into the wall, watching him sink to the floor upon impact. Roman then wrapped the guy with the keycard around a chokehold. The man kept squirming, but when he dropped the keycard, Roman finally let him limply to the floor. Logan came up behind Roman and grabbed the keycard. Smooth, Logan said ironically. What, it worked, didn't it? Logan rolled his eyes and scanned the keycard. The door swung open and the two walked inside. As soon as the door shut behind them, the air felt different. Logan felt chills crawl up his spine. He didn't like this. He soon understood why. Both Roman and Logan's virgin suddenly became obsolete and burlap sacks placed tightly over their heads. Roman attacked quietly, throwing his elbow into the goon's stud that was behind him. He removed the bag over his head, removing over Logan's aid. He pushed away Logan's goon and kicked him to the floor. Logan got a bag off his head and looked back at the goons who were getting up. Logan grabbed Roman's wrist and ran with him towards the other room. The two goons were in a fight of their trowels. Roman fiddled with his gun as Logan came to a stop. It was the dead end. Both of the boys turned to their heels to face these criminals. The guy in front of Logan, who was holding a baseball bat. Logan swallowed his nerves. Drop the bat! Roman shouted to the guy. The man only laughed. He stepped forwards and swung the bat, hitting Logan square in the head. The detective's vision began to spin. His body swayed as the pain quickly rose to his head. Logan fell to the floor, his eyes glued shut. Roman fired his gun at the man, who dodged it by an inch. The other goon kicked Roman between the legs. The officer dropped the gun and lowered himself to his knees. He shook his head, trying to get the sickness in his stomach to leave. When he looked up again, the one with the bat was holding it above his head. Roman, braced for the impact at the bat, came down to his head. Roman collapsed to the floor. The last thing he could hear was snickering of the goons and his own moaning from the pain spreading through his body as he dropped into sleep. 24. Virgil sat on the edge of the bed, just like Remus asked. He was fidgeting with his new skirt. Like it or not, Virgil knew what was about to happen. He wished he could prevent it, but he wanted to escape it all. He'd have to be in the best condition possible. The door swung open and slammed shut, making Virgil jump. There Remus stood in the door, his sick smirk spread across his face. My, don't you look slutty and inviting? Remus purred. Virgil felt tears well up in his eyes, his PTSD flashing memories through his mind of the times before Damien died. Whenever Damien would call him into his own personal room, everyone knew what that meant. Remus put his knees on top of the bed. Virgil shook as Remus towered above him. A long smile draped across his slimy skin. Virgil backed up a little bit, but Remus only moved closer. Virgil kept moving backwards, desperately trying to get Remus away. His back hit the headboard. His heart dropped. There was nowhere left to go. Remus pinned Virgil's shoulders to the headboard. He could feel the crazed man's breath, smell the strong alcohol and smoke fumes coming from it. Remus pushed his lips against Virgil's. The small boy squirmed. No matter what he tried, he didn't break their connection. Remus finally broke apart, panting. I've seen how Damien liked you so much. Remus cooed, running his hand up Virgil's thigh under his skirt. Virgil let a sob, the gag of his mouth still muffling his voice. A knock came upon the bedroom door. Remus's eye contact with Virgil became broken as the head whipped around. Virgil never felt so relieved. Remus let a low growl, turning back to Remus. I'll be right back, my raven. Remus whispered into Virgil's ear before kissing him on the cheek and removing himself from the bed. As Remus left the room, Virgil let his face grow with wet tears as soon as he was afraid to release. He tried to wash them away with his hand, but he wasn't doing much. Virgil pushed against his gag again. It was secured tightly onto his face. It became clear to the boy he wasn't getting it off this way. He head drifted to the side, looking to the dresser. There was a small shiny object sitting atop the dresser. Virgil's eyes sparked. He crawled off the bed, letting his legs touch the ground gently. His legs were stiff under his heavy body. His skin felt gross. Carried him to the dresser, where his eyes met a cutter. Virgil's eyes sparkled with tears. His past started to creep up his spine. The scars on his arms itched. All the times he let blood run down his arms as an escape from Damien. He grabbed the box cutter and popped the blade. With shaky hands, Virgil slashed and gagged from his mouth, watching the cloth fall from the ground, his mouth falling with heavy air. A line of liquid drained from his face where the gag. He kept the box cutter in his grip. Virgil went back to the bed, reaching under the bed to where he knew his old clothes were. He grabbed his jacket and sweatpants, clutching them like an old friend. He looked back to the door, seeing he was in the clear. He quickly changed his clothes. He threw his bronze skirt onto the bed, his shoulders lifted now that his own clothes were on. He slipped the box cutter into his pocket. He snuck over to the door and pressed an ear against it. He heard muffled talking, followed by a yelling Remus. The talking soon grew quiet. Virgil cracked the door open and peeked out. No one was in the room. The boy slipped out the door, shutting it quietly and looking around. The air carried no noise, and the light from the windows was barely any, just enough to see. Virgil crept through the new room. It was empty. However, he could hear more voices. He proceeded to the next room, peeking around the corner. His eyes widened. There were two of Remus's men, dragging and tied up Roman and Logan. Logan. Virgil whispered to himself. Their eyes were still closed, bodies limp. Virgil held in his anger, watching the two goons drag Roman and Logan into cages. Virgil stood up, taking the box cutter from his pocket. His feet bounded towards the two men. Virgil stabbed Roman's goon in the back of the neck. He cried out in pain and crumbled to the ground. Logan's goon whipped around, but Virgil pushed him back with his foot. When the goon made contact with the floor, Virgil took the box cutter to the man's cheek. He let the box cutter stick out in his cheek, watching the man fall limp. At this point, Virgil was panting like a dog. He looked upon Roman and Logan, both still deep and unconscious doze. Virgil stepped towards them, reaching out to untie the ropes to their wrists. Virgil stopped as his finger crept along his neck, gripping it tightly. Virgil's face paled as he dragged away from the detective and officer. Virgil was thrown to the floor and now facing an angry Remus. Think you can escape so easily, pet? Remus screamed. Virgil shook with fear, trying to pull himself away from Remus, but he couldn't escape him now. The crazed man grabbed the dagger from his pocket, his smile wide. Remus pounded his foot to Virgil's stomach, the boy letting out a yell of pain. Remus took the dagger in his hand and brought it down into Virgil's chest. The world seemed to stop for Virgil. He could see the handle of the dagger sticking out of his chest. He could hear a high-pitched white noise ringing through his skull. He could hear some red liquid flow out of him. His head grew heavy and sleep clouded his vision. His head dropped to the floor, his eyes closing. Everything faded around Virgil. Everything went black. Chapter 25. Logan opened his eyes groggily. His head ached, feeling slow returning to his bones. He lifted his head, the suspense pressure of his head making it difficult for him. He looked around, everything coming back into focus. He can't remember what happened last, but he could understand what was happening now. Virgil lay lifeless in front of him, panting Remus Gray. A knife handle stuck out of Virgil's chest near his heart. The adrenaline Logan began to pump. It all happened so quickly, and there was nothing Logan could have done to stop it. Logan's hand began to shake, a memory from deep inside him rattling to his core. Remus looked around, not yet noticing Logan was awake. The crazed man left the room. Yelling could be heard from the other room, but Logan didn't care. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Virgil. Roman began to stir as well, opening his eyes. He shifted his body, wanting to move into a better position. His fully awake eyes landed on Logan. He shoved her closer to him, taking his tied hands into his own. Logan, look at me, Roman pleaded. The detective shook his head, sweat running down his brow. Roman gazed and saw upon Virgil. He looked back at Logan, holding his hands tighter. Logan, you need to calm down. I can't save anyone, Logan mumbled, breaking into a sob. Roman understood now. It made sense. No, it's not too late. We could get him to a hospital. He's not gone yet, Roman comforted him. Logan leaned into Roman's shoulder, crying heavily. Roman let him cry while undoing Logan's rope around his hands. He watched the rope fall onto the floor. He untied his own with his teeth. The officer rubbed the freed wrists. Logan lifted his head from Roman's shoulder. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was tired. Feel better? Roman questioned. Logan hummed and nodded. Roman flashed him a smile, and the two crawled out of the cage they were stuck in. Logan quickly moved over to Virgil. Blood was still flowing from his wound, along the cut of his cheek, slowly dripping blood. Roman stood up and approached the two, watching Logan examine him. He should be fine, but he doesn't have a lot of time, Logan said, glancing up to Roman. Then we have to get him out of here now, Roman agreed. He bent down and scooped Virgil up in his arms. The boy was releasing small groans in return, but was unable to resist. Logan led the way as the two ran down the building, trying to find an exit. Logan reached for the radio attached to Roman's belt. He brought it to his mouth, hitting up the button. Patton, are you there? Over. Logan called out the radio. The detective and officer came to a new door. Logan opened it wide. Roman stepped back as he saw who was inside the door. Well, isn't this a surprise? Roman growled through gritted teeth. Every step Remus took forward, the two took steps back. Remus was wielding a dagger in each of his hands. You two have caused quite a commotion here. I intend to end that. Remus spun the daggers between his fingers, a smirk spreading across the face. Roman quickly gave Virgil to Logan, who became surprised. Get him out of here. I could take this lunatic, Roman declared, getting into a fighting stance. No one is going anywhere, Remus yelled out. He gained both of his boys' attention. His smirk only grew. You know, when Virgil got arrested, I thought that it was the end of Damon's legacy. It being dragged away from every person framed for his death, Remus snickered. So then you did kill Damien? Logan questioned, fidgeting with the radio in his hands. Of course. It was quite simple. A bit of cyanide in your wine, and you're gone within the hour. Roman looked over to Logan. They shared a concerned glance. Then I heard Virgil was pleading not guilty. That's when I had to step back in. You wanted to make sure your hands seemed clean by all means, didn't you? Roman said, piecing the puzzle together. Yes! I don't understand why, though, Logan pondered aloud. Remy said you were Damien's everything. Perhaps, but Damien was growing soft, not wanting to kill anybody anymore. But what's a good time without a little blood? Remus giggled. Logan began to grow a smile on his face. Remus looked upon him, noticing his finger was holding down a button on the radio. Did you get all of that, Patton? Over, Logan asked to the radio. Yep, more units and an ambulance are on the way, Patton declared. Rowan's face lifted with laughter. Remus's ears practically puffed out in hot steam. They'll need more than one ambulance when I'm done with you, Remus shouted. With that, he launched himself at Roman. The officer dodged him, letting the crazed man stumble forward. Roman grabbed Remus's arm and twisted it behind his back. Remus let out an odd scream while Roman kicked it back on Remus's knee, lowering him. Remus fought against Roman, breaking free. He stood up and threw one of the daggers at the officer. It hit him in the arm, causing Roman to scream. Remus turned to Logan. The detective was shaking so much he was struggling to hold Virgil in his arms. This all ends now, Remus shouted. Remus grabbed Virgil roughly from Logan's arms, then pushed Logan's head into the wall. His vision spun, but only fell to the ground, trying to regain his balance. Remus threw Virgil to the ground and removed the dagger, still inside the poor man's Again, but Remus didn't care. He raised the dagger over his head, ready to send it down, but he stopped. A loud noise rang through the room. Remus's body figure shrunk. Logan shook the sick feeling from his head and looked over, Roman pointing a gun at Remus with one bullet on the floor. Remus turned back to look at Roman, shock glued to his face. Remus let out a low laugh. This changes nothing, he growled. I think it does, Roman argued. The sound of the door slamming open rang through the building, and more cops and paramedics rushed through the old building. The two officers arrested Remus, while the paramedics treated Logan and Roman. Logan could see that they were loading Virgil onto a stretcher. The detective rushed forwards and ran towards the ambulance. Please, is there room for one more? Logan pleaded. All the paramedics looked at each other before nodding. Logan smiled and jumped inside, watching Virgil's chest slowly rise and fall. A smile spread over his face. Everything was all right. Chapter 26. Logan pulled up to the courthouse in his nicest suit. The detective had a good feeling about today, a smirk present on his face. He grabbed Virgil's evidence file and tucked it under his arm. He exited the car and locked it behind him, feeling the wind blow through his hair like his own cheer squad. Logan entered the courthouse, showing the lady at the front desk his badge, and proceeded inside. Everything looked the same from the previous Saturday. The same jury, the same lawyers, the same judge. Roman also stood in uniform in front of the judge's post. He had a sling around his arm that got stabbed. Roman smiled as Logan approached. How are you feeling about this? Ready. This judge doesn't know what's coming for him. Logan laughed. Roman nodded, wishing Logan luck. Logan took a seat next to Virgil's lawyer. The lawyer flashed him a nervous glance, but relayed back when he realized that Virgil wasn't here. Where's Mr. Black? I'm afraid he's still recovering from the stabbing, although I'm planning to visit him after this, so hopefully this won't take long. Logan concluded, taking the file and placing it back on the table. The clock struck 9. The judge released a heavy sigh. All right, let's get this over with, he said, with a bang of his gavel. Today we settled the case of Mr. Virgil Black in a charge of murdering Mr. Damien Lai more than a week ago. Defendant, who do you plead? Virgil's lawyer looked at Logan. The confident young detective smiled and folded his hands together. Not guilty. Oh, I've seen you return to Detective Sanders. The judge huffed in an eye roll. Indeed I have, and I have some things I think you need to see, Logan said, taking a file and walking up to the judge. Logan presented it to the judge as if he was a waiter in a fancy restaurant. The judge snatched it from it and opened it. What am I looking at, detective? One of my many things you have probably play-by-play shots, photos of Mr. Black first finding Mr. Lai's body in an alleyway near the college. These were taken from the museum security cameras. You can clearly see that Mr. Black had arrived second, did he not? Logan questioned. The judge flipped through the pictures, sighing but nodding along with Logan. The jury broke out in small whispers. Now you'll see a picture taken by me of Virgil's chest, clearly littered with bruises, welts, and cuts. I think you'll agree those injuries are, in some places, one couldn't hit or cut themselves. Wouldn't you say, Your Honor? I have to agree with you there, Mr. Sanders, but that doesn't answer one thing. Who really killed Damien Lai? The judge asked. Logan grew a smirk across his face, followed by Roman, who couldn't help it. I'm glad you asked, Your Honor. Logan skipped back over to the judge, pointing to an audio transcript in an audio recorder. We got the killer to admit it, Logan stated. The jury gasped and the judge's eyes widened. How did you manage that? The judge asked. I'm better at my career than I seem, Logan said, pointing to his head. The judge grabbed the audio recorder and pressed play. So then, did you kill Damien? Logan's voice filled the device's speakers. Logan's smile was growing. Roman extended his hand, and Logan met it with a quiet high five. Of course, it was quite simple. A little cyanide in your wine, and you're gone within the hour. Then I heard Virgil was pleading not guilty, and that's when I had to step back in. Mrs. Voice shocked the jury. It became clear Logan was winning. You wanted to make sure your hands were clean, by all means, didn't you? Yes! The audio stopped, and the jury went back to talking. The judge's face read shock and slight horror. So, who was the man that admitted then? The judge asked. The jury seemed to lean in, hanging on to Logan's every word. The real murder of Damien Lai is none other than Remus Gray. The judge sat back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The jury looked to the judge. The lawyer looked to the judge. Roman and Logan looked to the judge. After a long moment of silence, the judge sighed. Mr. Sanders, I'm afraid I owe you an apology. The man grabbed his gavel, raising in the air. I hereby sentence former prisoner 04891219, Virgil Black, not guilty for the death of Damien Lai. The gavel came down and the jury clapped. Logan bowed his head to the judge, a smile resting happily on his face. Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you, Mr. Sanders. The judge turned to Roman. Remus Gray will be arrested as soon as he is in a stable condition. As for Mr. Black, Logan's heart stopped. He looked at the judge. A smile fell upon his face. I wish Mr. Black a speedy recovery. Logan nodded, reaching up to grab Virgil's file. Roman ran over to him, patting him on the shoulder. That was absolutely incredible, Roman declared happily. Another pair of arms wrapped around Logan's waist, hugging him tightly. Logan turned to see his brother. That was really awesome, Lo. You really showed that, Judge, Patton said. I didn't realize you were here, Logan said, surprised. I was in the audience. I wasn't going to miss this. Logan and Roman both laughed as Patton let go of his older brother. Patton's hand snaked his way into Roman's. The two blushed, but Logan only rolled his eyes playfully. How's Virgil? Patton questioned. Logan's shoulders slumped. I was planning on seeing him after this. Last time I was there, he was going into the third round of surgery. Turns out Remus damaged some organs when he stabbed him. But that was only last night, Logan admitted, rubbing his arm. Roman and Patton shared a glance. Patton took Logan's hand, the brother looking deeply into each other. Go get your Virgil, Patton told him. Logan nodded, releasing Patton's hand and jogging out of the courtroom. Roman grabbed Patton's hand again, pulling him close into a kiss. When they released, they watched Logan go. Chapter 27. The detective arrived to the hospital, goosebumps filling his arms. Being there still upset him. The fact that he was the only other time he had been to the hospital so many times was when he was the patient. He got out of the car and shoved his keys into his pockets. He took a breath of cool autumn air. It filled him with confidence. He needed to walk inside. Logan greeted the nurse at the front desk, patting his hands nervously on the surface. Here to see Mr. Black again? The nurse asked, which Logan nodded, biting his lip. The nurse smiled. You're in luck. He just woke up, the nurse said, a little too cheery. Logan bowed his head in thanks and proceeded down the hall. He didn't have to be told twice where the room was anymore. He just knew. He stopped at the room 406, taking a breath. He pushed open the door with a shaky hand. Logan peeked inside, the slight of Virgil's condition also scaring him. Virgil was connected to an IV, the breathing machine, and a heart rate monitor, not to mention all the bandages on his elbow joint from the shots he was given. Logan shuddered, but walked further inside. The sound of the door closing is what snapped Virgil's attention to the detective. He slowly frowned, turning to a grin. Virgil stuck out his hand, which Logan grabbed, placing a delicate kiss upon it. I missed you, Virgil said, his voice groggy and raspy. I missed you too, love, Logan told him. Virgil's heart monitor fluttered. It usually did whenever Logan was around. How did the surgery go? Logan questioned. Virgil cleared his throat and sat up a bit, preparing himself. The anticipation was almost positioned, but Logan got through it. The doctor said that I should be my last surgery for the next 6 months until the stitches dissolve and they replace them with more permanent ones. Virgil smiled through his words. This brought tears to Logan's eyes. He became overjoyed with emotions. Finally, his love would heal, and Logan could bring him home. That's great, love. However, I have good news to tell as well. Oh yeah? How did the trial go? Virgil's face illuminated. Logan swallowed, holding the emo's hand tighter. You're not guilty, and Remus will be behind bars for a long, long time, Logan assured him. Virgil cheered in his seat. He wrapped his arms around the detective in joy. When they let each other go, Virgil stifled a laugh. I bet you made the judge cheerlead his words, didn't you? Logan laughed too, nodding his head. How are Roman and Patton? I feel like I haven't seen them in forever. They're great. Really excited for you to be released. In fact, we've planned a double date to celebrate, Logan proclaimed. Virgil smiled, his cheeks glowing red. That sounds awesome. I can't wait to be out of here. I mean, how many times in a row do I need to eat hospital spaghetti surprise before it starts to taste like everything else that the hospital serves? Logan laughed at the boy's statement. You're really a trooper, Virgil. Logan chuckled. Virgil leaned back in his bed, his face wrinkled in pain. Logan loosened his grip on his hand, growing with concern. Are you all right, love? Yeah. Virgil nodded. Just certain positions really hurt my stomach. Did they tell you what happened? What Remus injured? Logan asked. Virgil flinched slightly at Remus's name, but reached over to his table. On the table was a medical file which he gave to his boyfriend. Logan opened it up, looking at the pictures and papers. The doctor says it was a kidney and a part of my liver. They said that it wasn't what he hit was the problem, but the internal bleeding. Logan finished, closing the file and handing it to Virgil. The two grew silent, still holding hand. Virgil looked over to Logan, his eyes glued to the floor. Logan? Yes, love? Thanks for being there for me. You definitely paid me back after I saved you. Virgil groaned. Logan chuckled. Anything for you, love, Logan commented. Logan leaned forward, making Virgil do the same. Virgil Black? Yes, Logan Sanders. A pause. I love you. So that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really encourage you to hit the link for the book. Even if you don't want to read it yourself, there are some very fun facts at the end that I think you would like to read. Sorry, cut out. I would like to give a special shout out to Fun and Games with CC. Her YouTube link will be in the iCard and in the description. Today is her birthday. Happy birthday, Carly. I enjoy your existence. Appreciate the art on the screen. I liked making it, and I hope you like it. So with that being said, next week's book is very juicy, and it's amazing. And I encourage you to tune in next time to read it with me. So hope you enjoyed, and like always, do your best.